We just finished learning about BOCRs, so I'm not going to focus on the whys and hows we ended up, not too much at least, but mostly on the how to implement this kind of solutions and how to get information from our decision makers. The example that we are looking at is the heard at crossroads. It's an actual decision that happened 2 or 3 years ago. Hertz at some point decided to evaluate whether they should or should not uh, go on and replace, update 20% of their rental car fleet with gas or electric vehicles. On the other side, they were really worried about this kind of decision because we are talking about a completely new um, endeavor for them. There were challenges related to the financial perspectives, balancing high upfront costs of EVs with potential fuel savings and tax breaks. There were challenges related to the customer preference, gauging demand for EVs while addressing potential concerns about driving range and changing availability. And there were also operational issues. For example, would they need to invest and change infrastructure in order to be able to handle the changing situation? Would they need to train their personnel in order to be able to handle EVs? Or it's not that difficult and they can handle it without major retraining and reorganizing of the people? And there were, of course, like all the new endeavors, some potential benefits, quite a few, otherwise we wouldn't be discussing about it, right? We have environmental, reducing emissions, becoming a leader in sustainable transport. That was one of their wants. And there were also a chance to gain competitive advantage, attracting environmentally conscious um, customers and positioning that way Hertz as a forward-thinking company. So we're talking about a decision that is complex with significant financial and strategic implications. And of course, as you were discussing, we could potentially go ahead and break the problem in smaller little problems and solve it as separate model, but we can also follow a BOCR strategy. Now, in this BOCR setup, we would be looking on one hand on the customer's perspective, our decision makers, and that's what the strategic criteria will give us. Here you will see all those little factors that will help your decision be a custom decision for that specific group of people that are deciding, for that organization. In this case, how the decision will be decision that Hertz likes, meaning that they find it that makes sense in their situation. It's a decision that they can make sense, a decision that they can actually use and apply. It's not just, a consulting analysis that will go on a drawer and nobody will be hearing about it again. So those strategic criteria are exactly those factors that are going to help the company, the decision maker, to make a decision that will be completely to the point, related to them, and not a general decision that any optimization model from those that we all of us like could generate for any potential organization. On the other hand, there is a part that is totally objective, the benefits, opportunities, cost, the risk. That's the part that your data gathering and data analysis skills should be put to great work because it's a part that we would like it to be objective. We want to see what are the expected benefits from each and every potential alternative solution. That's not the time to express your direct opinion because we are trying to find that very uh, clear perspective that you could take it from here, put it in another group of car renting companies and reuse it. So the part of benefits, opportunities, cost, and risk has a high degree of reusability because of its objective nature versus the strategic criteria that are there to help you customize the solution essentially. Now, you will not see the largest and most complex of the models here because that's not our goal. But anyway, we are going to have some levels of complexity. In this decision, we went for HP subnets because that way we are going to uh, make it a little bit smaller and easier to handle in the time of our workshop. But that doesn't mean that we couldn't have bottom level ANP models. So on one hand, for the side of the benefits, we have performance factors. And on the other hand, we have more or less market factors. For example, in the performance factors, we added operating costs, investment, tech innovation, environmental impact. While on the side of the market factors, you can see market positioning, the availability of the product, the familiarity, well, a little bit of customer experience involved there too. But I think that we can accept this grouping just for the purposes of making it simpler and more well structured. From the perspective of opportunities, we went for a simpler analysis essentially, where we have the governmental incentives that we are expecting to see, possible partnerships. Yes, when Heard was coming into this decision, they were hoping that the same way that right now they have partnerships and special deals with quite a few car manufacturers, they would be able to do something similar with EVs and specifically with Tesla. Unfortunately, that was not something that happened. However, at the time of this decision-making process, they were still hoping that there will be partnerships that would be equally good, if not even better than the existing ones that they had with the internal combustion cars. And of course, there is an opportunity to improve and have a more modern take on their brand image, bringing the sustainability, environmental friendly, advanced technological company. Now, from the side of the cost and the risk, and just as a reminder, you will see me while entering values and handling this to focusing mostly on the ways that we should enter values in such a way that the riskiest and most expensive solution comes to the surface. So it's one of the few places, as far as I know, in AHP and ANP models where somebody will be asking you to end up with a result that calls for the most expensive, most costly solution and end up with a result that gives the highest threat alternative. And here is um, a little bit of clarification because um, although we are talking about risk, the positive risks are already covered in the opportunities. So our risks are essentially threats that our system might face. So negative with a probabilistic perspective. Now, before moving you to the actual implementation, I want to give you an idea of what you're going to be facing. The first and actually most of our work will happen inside an Excel spreadsheet because we are going to create the structure step by step in an Excel spreadsheet, and we will use that file in order to create our Excel spreadsheets that have all the questionnaires that our users need to fill in, usually in a more refined survey view, which would be an option while you generate the results. And then we are going to take those results that can be collected either through interviews or through a survey, or often than not, and bring them back for further analysis with our AhpAnpLib, that is the tool that we will be using. So as you see over here, my structure, my Excel spreadsheet, really, let's be honest, it's just an Excel spreadsheet here, has first and foremost what I care about, my strategic criteria. Then for each of the merits, you will see a different tab in my spreadsheet. In each of these, following the same rules that say that in the first column, you put the name of the cluster. In all the consecutive columns, you put the names of the nodes that you would like to include in that cluster. And this is the process that you follow in each and every setup. For a full, complete structure, each of my perspectives, models really, submodels, should have also a connection perspective. That connection tab really says exactly what you would expect. Which node should be connected with what node in order to form the overall model. Now, having said all that, I hope that you had time this morning to go through with Liron the use of our library and Google Colab, because now I'll put you to test. Let's clear our drawings from here. And let me take you to a different environment that I bet, however, it's more familiar than what you were thinking that it will be. Because we will be getting in Excel. Yep, old good Excel. I don't think that I know how I would manage without Excel. Allow me a second to save our structure, because that's what we are going to do. We are going to do a BOCR full structure. In an Excel spreadsheet. That's the first and foremost thing that we want here. Now, just because that's the way that I think, you're going to see me setting up all the tabs that I want to create here. And then we are going to start entering the information that we were discussing for the models, the way that we describe them in our slide, and move them over here. Now, I should say strategic connections, but those of you that know me, I always go for the shortcut. So benefits and oops, benefits connections. And some opportunities to work with. Now you will say, why are you going and changing the names? Because I bet that if I don't follow the same formatting everywhere, when I'll try to use this tab, I'll make mistakes and I lose much more time than editing right now what I need to edit. And yep, we've got our shadow structure all at once. And now it's time to find out what we need to create. I probably should, and you don't need to, but for all of us, I'm going to bring quickly here the drawing that I had with me in the PowerPoint, as you see, and I'll use it to structure my first setup. I have my goal. That's the first cluster. And if you like color coding like me, feel free to do. Nobody says no. Strategic criteria also. And then I can start adding my nodes. Give me just a quick second here. We can make sure that we will always be consistent. All right. And with that done, we can definitely continue with our overall setup. Let's start adding our criteria over here. Just copied from my PowerPoint over here. The file, strategic criteria, everything that I said. For goal, I could put EVS or gas, but goal node should be good enough. And then I'm going to carefully take all the nodes, any order you want, you can put them, but I will keep myself straight by putting them in the given order, so I don't need to look around to find out which one is which. Now, remember that the strategic criteria are a ratings model. That's why you don't see me bringing in any alternatives in the whole setup. And I'll just copy and paste here to make one of the pairwise comparison kind of matrices, although right now we would call it a neighborhood matrix, because really we are going to set up the neighborhood of these friends over here. And since it's a ratings model and it has, as you saw just a second ago, only one level, the thing that we want to do is connect our goal node to each and every criterion, strategic criterion that is at the top level. Oh, done. See? I just created the model, almost. I will repeat the process for the benefit, opportunities, cost, or risk. So every time, what I do is that I take my structure that could be on paper, any way that we like setting it up. I'll bring it in so I have a visual of what I'm trying to do. probably prefer to move all my components at once, like this. Then for each level goal, this is a cluster, my friends. Goal, it goes benefits, subfactors, the subfactors over there, you see. I'm gonna call them performance factors because that's the name of the cluster over there of their parent node, to be very precise, and market factors. We got it. Last one, but not least, first appearance for our alternatives. Don't forget, we're trying to decide whether to replace 20% of our overall cars with EVs or stay as we are. In the benefits cluster, you will see me putting the names of the parent nodes for the other two subclusters, see, performance factors and market factors. In performance factors, I'll put in exactly the items that belong to that group, and the same for the market factors. And then at the end, for the alternatives, here we are. Oh, one more done, and actually was one of the largest networks that we wanted to do. Don't worry about trying to keep up because I'll share with you the structure file as soon as I have it ready, so we can move on. And if you feel like, you can also try to follow along. Okay, let me bring in my benefits nodes in the order given, including the alternatives. And let's transpose them to create the matrix. Let's see. The goal node was connected. Oh, if you forgot, I'm forgetful. Let's bring this picture with us again. Let's see what we were trying to do. Oh, yes. The goal node needs to connect with the performance factors and the market factors. The performance factor should be connected to operating investment notice in the game. And let's continue from there. Market positioning along with availability and familiarity in the other group. And everything that is in the bottom level will be connected with our alternatives. Not the alternatives themselves. I don't need to create a self loop. And just because I'm a visual person, you are going to see that I will use conditional formatting to highlight the rules that are greater than one. Here we are with the selection that we wanted. And now it's a little bit easier to see that I have connected each group with its own nodes. So its cluster was connected with its own children. The influence goes from the goal node to the performance factors and market factors, from the performance factors to the sub-factors of that group, same for the market factors with its own sub-factors. And then we have all the bottom level criteria connected to the alternative. Looks good. Now, working the same way, I will end up with the opportunities. They were a little bit simpler, as you see, the cost, the risk, and the connections that go with that. And now, let me give it a second so I can share with you the same file, because we are going to move to the side of the development. You should be able to get it in less than a second. Here we are. Let's make sure that you have access to this file before we continue with the next step. Now it's the time that I'm going to kind of test you, because we are going to need what Lirong taught us this morning. So we are going to open our Colab environment and try to set up, well, not exactly set up, just to read that Excel file so we can get our different questionnaires back. Now you will need to open a browser if you haven't done it already. And I need to go to the lost and found and find my lost browser. Here we are. This is an empty Colab environment like the one that you saw this morning. And first thing first, I'm going to create a new notebook. For those of you that would like the challenge of following along live, the link is in your chat. Let me create a new notebook, and I'll give you a second also to load your own pages. And now you should be able to have your own file here. And I am going to give it a name. Let's call it BOCR ISAHP24. 24, not a year ago. Sorry about that. And let's install everything. Here we are. As we are going on, you will see the commands coming through your chat so you can also follow along. And a little bit of waiting time while it is loading. And I hope that by now you are ready for our next step, which is to add a little bit of more of code, calling all our libraries like this. And as this is happening, I will use my favorite way. So really wrong, we'll have different ways today. But I do prefer to connect my Google Drive when we need to use files. So you are going to see me adding a bunch of lines that essentially tell my code where to find the files that we will be working on. The highlighted portion should be different for each of you depending on the structure that you have. This is actually the way that I have saved my files in the model. And at this point, if I run it, you will see a bunch of questions related to whether I allow or not Google to look at Google, which I do. Now, the good thing for all of this is that you don't really need to worry about the code because it's the same every time. Even I don't think while I am adding these lines because they are just the same every time that I work on them. So when I want to create a model, I grab my create model golden lines, that's how I call them, and they are 3 lines altogether. You will see them right now coming up on your screens. To create a model, I need to name it something, say where to find the file that contains the structure, that file that we created together, and also say which page, that's the struct file name, con sheet name that you see there, that contains the information. It seems that I did it. And what does that mean? It means that mm, the moment that all these steps are done, you should be able to create, generate your file. Let's see what have we done so far. We read the file and we generated our questionnaire. Now remember, setting up a BOCR model is not an easy introduction step. It's something that you would do after having a lot of experience with a simple HP models that are a better environment to start with. Essentially, a BOCR setup is 5 times an AHP or ANP model, and that's exactly the process that you need to follow along. That's why it's something that we do for complex models. Now, if everything went okay, I should be able, when opening up my Google Drive, which you see it popping up over here, I should be able to identify what, well, what I said over here. See, this is the folder that I was using. So I'm trying to find That folder also over here is on the top, as you can see. And the subfolder was BOCR, so we are going to continue there. And inside here, now you can see the first of the files that we will be using. This is the first file that we generated with those lines. It's a pairwise comparison Excel spreadsheet where we can enter our judgments. Now, it's always easier if you add and edit this kind of files locally on your Excel or use Office 365 instead of Google Sheets, just because they have some minor incompatibilities. However, I guess I leave pericolosamente and I will enter my judgments here. We usually enter the judgments by reading the row and comparing it to the column label. So with respect to the decision that we are trying to make to replace 20% of the fleet with EVs, what is more important for her, sustainability or the financial viability of the solution? And right now, their priority tends to be sustainability. Now, in the next step, I will continue entering judgments the same way. And you see that I am not entering very smart choices right now because my goal here is to say that I am going to fill in all the judgments that I have and save it. And the moment that I have that saved, and please make sure that when you save, you actually make a copy, and instead of calling it empty, you call it really anything except empty. I'm going to call it filled in. And that will make a copy for me, which I'm going to use in a second. Now, as you see, following the same process, I should be able to create all the files that I need for a BOCR. Due to our limited time, if I'm going to show you how these models will look instead of going through them and building them. However, we have plenty of YouTube videos that go step by step through the process, and they are a very good starting point if you wish to create a BOCR after having mastered the AHP and ANP models. So let's take a look on the way that things would be. We talked about our main model. Let's leave it as a parenthesis for a second, and I'll show you how the benefits, cost, risks, and opportunities look like. Each of them has exactly the same lines that we used so far. Read, create the empty, generate the results from the filled in, nothing else. Read, create the empty, generate the results from the filled in file. So 3 steps every time that you want to create an AHP model or an ANP model. Essentially, there is no difference in the steps that you need to follow, um, whether it is AHP or ANP. It's exactly the same process from this perspective. And I'll prove my point. I'll show you also the cost. The truth is that I simply copied and pasted from one file to the other because the only thing that changes from a benefit to a cost to a risk to an opportunities Python file is this line over here that says what's the name of the model that I'm going to be using. So because it's cost, I was reading the cost pages, tabs of my Excel spreadsheet. While in the benefits, I was reading my benefits pages. All the rest remained the same. Okay, obviously I was changing the names of the files, but the structure exactly the same. Let's see it one more time. I saved it with a different name. And then I said, okay, everything is the same except what you're gonna read, which is this, and where you are going to save them. Empty risks, filled in risks, result risk. So it's a very streamlined process while you create it. And why did I stop here and I didn't show the main? Well, benefits, opportunities, cost, and risk will be for HP or ANP simple models. The one that is different is the ratings model. In a rating setup, I need my criteria. I can have a lot of different alternatives that I do not connect at some point with a model in the usual AHP way. And for each criterion that I select to involve in my rating setup, I will need to define its own scale. Now, if I want, I could use the same scale for all of them, or I can use a separate different scale or different levels with the same names of scales for the ratings part. The ratings model is a different process that we cannot really analyze fully right now. However, I'll share with you at the end of this conversation all the files that went along with the model so you can try to replicate the steps following the tutorials that we have. Now, for the ratings model, besides that we have a couple, one essentially very important step where we define for each of the criteria that we are using what scale we want to use and what are the levels of that scale, what are the priorities assigned to that scale. The rest, of course, remains as before the same. But let's take a quick peek on how the corresponding Excel spreadsheet looks. I'll get back to our original folder, focusing on my ratings empty table, and I'll show you also the completed. As you see here, when I start the ratings model, you will see the scales. Those are the scales that we just looked at. Oops, here you are, my friend. Risks, costs, benefits, main. Here you were hiding. These scales over here are the ones that made me be able to see over here the full set of pairwise comparisons. They have nothing to do with the criteria this time. This is when you say high, what do you mean? When you say medium, what do you mean? Or when you want to use excellent, which you want for the customer experience, you decided, what do you really mean? And goes on with this process for all of them. The scales can be changed here or can be directly entered, even directly as priorities in the original file that we were looking at a second ago here. For example, notice that my excellent to poor scale has already values. I decided what values I wanted. And you see on the corresponding Excel that the excellent to poor came in with the values that I had originally given. Now, these scales are used in this table over here, and the logic is that on the top part of the screen, I will fill in the drop down that is available. And by filling in the drop down, the values on the second part will be calculated. And now this is one of the places that I want you to always be very careful, because that feature is not compatible with Google Sheets. So you have to make sure that you are using Microsoft Excel when filling in that particular component. And we'll go there immediately so you can see how the ratings we go. Get filled in and give me my final result for my rating side of the BOCR model. These essentially are the values that Monica was using in comparison. Um, Now, when we have filled in all this, we will end up with an integration plan that has to do with the formulas that we want to use to get our final results. Let's take a quick look at it. Okay, the quick part might not be exactly quick. But it will be there. Here is how we do the integration. Having done all the calculations, I have results from the first model, benefits, opportunities, costs, and risks. They get these are the values that I enter as a user, and then they get idealized. So the best value acquires the value of 1, while everything else will be uh, a partial score. You can actually see that essentially what we do is that we divide each entry by the maximum of the vector to do that calculation. And on the other side, over here, we have the results of the ratings. Remember that in the ratings, you are actually rating not the benefits, but the benefits that correspond to the best alternative under benefits. So benefits of EV, and they get the score that they get. Opportunities that correspond to EV, how do they facilitate the strategic objectives? And you get the next number. and goes on until you have all your values in place. Now, with on one hand, these values over here, and on the other hand, the values that I got from my original model, the four small benefits, opportunities, cost, and risks, I can calculate both the long term, that would be the additive negative. I'm multiplying the values that have to do with the ratings, with the strategic objective, to the corresponding results that I got from that subnetwork. And on the other hand, I have the short term that has the ratio of benefit opportunities of the cost and risks. So over here, I don't use the ratings essentially. I'm using only the left-hand side values. And you can actually see it in practice that I'm not using in any place my values that come from the ratings table. I'm just using the results that I have, the idealized results that I have from the BOCR, the smaller networks, while for the additive negative, the long term, I take into consideration the perspective of the strategic objective. Because usually the strategic objectives affect the long-term applications instead of the short-term applications. And I know that this was a very rushed going through, but it was a starting point so you know what you have available inside of this BOCR world, and you can find, take your time to go through the steps and identify the exact process that works for your model. It's one, in my opinion, of the underused, let's say, models in AHP, while it's really essentially easier to put a problem in broken down structure of benefits, opportunities, cost, and risk than to have to solve it all in one. And remember, because that's one of the difficulties that have to do with BOCR, that since you're breaking down in different perspectives, the different perspectives cannot be huge models by themselves, because that's exactly the idea. I'm taking one by one the perspectives and trying to break down a large and complex problem to smaller, more manageable problems. And I think that that's all our time. If you have any questions, I would gladly answer, or you can contact me. We are going to send you all the material and files that I was using today in after the end of the workshops today. And I think that's all from me.